The vision of our business is really to just turn illiquid assets into something liquid. Compute Labs, which now focuses on turning GPUs into a investable asset class or alternative investment. We kind of figured that there needs to be a new bridge for helping people invest into this emerging market.
My guest today is Nikolay, the co-founder of Compute Labs. Nikolay, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I do want to hear all about Compute Labs, but I also think you have a very interesting backstory and some of the different roles that you had. Some people will be listening and won't be able to see the strong beard game. You had a good run over at Art of Shaving and even got into gaming pretty seriously at the gaming industry. So would love to hear a little bit about you and the journey that brought you to Compute Labs eventually.
Yeah, sure. And most people don't ask me about the things I've done before I started my career. I think of that time period at the Art of Shaving as a very fun, like post-college, post-university experience, just trying to find my career. So it's interesting to even go into these details for me. But yeah, so the Art of Shaving, this was just like a gig post-university because I graduated, and then right after graduate university, I'm like, okay, what the hell am I going to do? I kind of had some ideas. I kind of had intended that I would just go into business and entrepreneurship because I already had like some small businesses with my buddies, but they weren't serious. They were just like college little things. And when I graduated, I'm like, shit, I need a job. I need to make some money because I was living with my parents and I just needed something to feed myself. And so I went to the mall, just got a job there. Actually, what happened is one of my friends just got me in with an interview with their manager. And I told him very much right there and then, like, yo, I want to be here for 2 to 3 months most because I just need to go out and use my degrees, use my education. And the guy was like, yeah, fine, cool, whatever, let's do that. Ended up being like 7, 8 months because the job market sucks for any new grad. But that being said, yeah, I was just like a salesperson at a mall and I did actually pretty well there. I learned a lot about in-person sales that most people wouldn't really expect. Learned how to like navigate, how to upsell someone, even though they're there for one reason, you're really going to upsell them on a whole bunch of other things. And I learned a lot about that. But what's really interesting is how I went from the art of shaving to my actual career into gaming. That's kind of the fun part for me because the way I got my next job, Xsola, which I stayed there for 6 years, an enterprise video game fintech company. At the Art of Shaving, I met somebody there, a customer who just wanted to buy a simple $25 refill for a razor product. I upsold him all the way up to like a $500, $600 total value package, which was really nice. When you're there, you're qualifying your customer. You're like, okay, based on what you're purchasing, this is what I can tell some details about you. And based on the fact they were purchasing a travel product, it was very easy to upsell them. The cost wasn't really a hindrance to them. I could tell that they had a good job. And so as I was cashing this person out at that register, I was like, hey, so yeah, like, tell me about yourself. Like, what do you do for work? He's like, oh, I work in video games. I'm like, oh, no kidding. I told him, like, I played video games my whole life, started as a kid, 5 years old, and still stuck to it. He's like, oh, yeah, we work with these companies. Like, those are some of my favorite publishers. Are you guys hiring? He's like, well, yeah, but we require a college degree. I'm like, great, I have 6 of them. And then so I basically
Got you covered.
exactly. I asked him for his card. He gives it to me. He was very reluctant. He gave me a chance, and I emailed him that same day. Then I pinged him and followed up with him. I was just being a salesperson for
Good
myself.
sales. Yes.
I was annoying the shit out of him. And then, eventually they emailed me back saying, we actually have a job fair coming up. Why don't you come in? And I'm still working at the Art of Shaving. I do this job fair and I meet a bunch of other people. I go through 4 different rounds of interviews. In this interview process, I meet 10 different interviewers. And finally, I got the job, which was amazing. It was everything I wanted. It was my first career and entry-level position into like a corporate role. It was super exciting. I was told that if any one person had said no, I wouldn't have gotten the job. So yeah, it was kind of like grueling interview process, but it was super exciting for me and my way into gaming. And I didn't even really know I wanted to get into gaming until just like midway into this post college experience. Yeah, it was fun. So yeah, that's my intro
A $25 shave product turned into $500, turned into a interview potential and your first like real career opportunity. That's pretty amazing. I always think that I was a server in high school and college. I actually did door-to-door sales for like a competition to raise funds for stuff. And it's like
Love that.
you feel like you learn so much more doing those things than you realize until you actually get into the corporate world and you see kind of those skills of just like until you go through the repetition and you deal with all the different scenarios like on the ground, it's hard to learn that stuff. Like
100% agree with you. I think these very, let's call it like low technical knowledge, skilled work are so essential to any of our development, and in particular for corporate roles. Like we learn about customer service, we learn about sales. We just like we learn the things that matter in growing our own businesses as well.
agreed. Okay, so you managed to get through this grueling interview process where any one person that just kind of gives you the gladiator thumbs down and you're done. How do you get from gaming to GNFTs?
Right. Yeah, good question. So, little side note there is during that interview process, during the job fair, I actually met another candidate there. And one of those candidates who did not get the job, but did get the job 3 months later. I ended up working with that person anyways at Exola. But for this purpose of the job fair, they did not get the role. They did not get the job. One of those people is my co-founder, my CEO,
Wow.
which is really interesting. And I'll go into those details as well. But so, yeah, so at Exola, I started as entry level sales. And for those people who aren't aware, because it's very much B2B based company, Exola is a enterprise fintech company for video game publishing. So like think of it kind of like Shopify or maybe a PayPal for video games. It helps publishers go direct to consumer. And, I worked with amazing publishers from like Epic Games to Nexon, EA. Like I remember doing a really fun project with Apex Legends, which was awesome. Basically, a lot of amazing publishers, and I had a great time. But I started there as entry level sales, and I worked my way up to senior sales, and then I was asked to move to like enterprise level project management. Then I was asked to move to kind of like strategic partnerships with a product role. And so I founded my own department there. I grew my own team. I helped the company grow from 200 people to 1,200 people. I've done a bunch of M&A there. I've launched multiple products, and I had a great time. That being said, I stayed there for 6 years, and 6 years is a long time for any place. And I got tired, bored, complacent, and I needed something new. And my colleague, who really well, Albert, he asked me to hop on this like little project with him that he was starting. He was at Exola with me for probably the first couple of years. Then he did his own thing and then another thing. And then he wanted to do something else again. And he knew he needed help with partnerships and BD, which is something that I'm naturally good at. And as he asked me to hop on, like I could use something fresh. So that's kind of how it happened. And from there, I went from gaming to Compute Labs, which now focuses on turning GPUs into a investable asset class or alternative investment for investors. So
So
that's that story.
that's super interesting. So essentially, you went from before even Art of Shaving, startups with friends, and then back through, got a lot of learning in, learned about BD, learned about partnership, growing from 1,200. That's a pretty stark growth slope. And I'm sure just tons of information coming at you through lessons learned and kind of
Oh,
real
yeah.
life experience there. And then back to startup with friends. So go a little bit more into Compute Labs, what you guys do, and how did Albert come up with this idea? I guess what was the need that you guys saw there?
Yeah. So the idea really comes down to, hey, we all know that GPUs, actually more importantly, AI is this growing market, this growing infrastructure that everyone is now using, whether they know it or not. We all hear about ChatGPT and other models like Gemini or Claude, things like that. And I think we all feel that this market is growing, kind of like the dot-com era, or like we all know that the internet is growing. But how does someone reasonably invest into the space and be a part of it? And then beyond that, if we're thinking about just like, okay, the market's growing, how to get into the market, maybe we'll think about, similar comparison would be like if thinking about the California gold rush, who was the most successful during the gold rush? It wasn't really the miners, it was the people selling the picks and shovels. So if we're
Hmm.
thinking about those kind of things, like what is the infrastructure that is helping get into this market? We then think about, well, it'd be the infrastructure, the physical equipment, the GPUs or the compute resources that will help us get there. We kind of figure that there's no reasonable way for anyone to enter the market with ease. And it takes so much education. People don't know where to start. There's a big gap in the market for anybody to enter this space. If I had asked my wife or any of my friends, hey, how are you planning on investing in AI? No one can answer that question. Maybe they'll tell me I'll buy some Nvidia stocks, which is fair. They're a fantastic company, but that's a $1 trillion stock that can go up or down. I mean, you're investing in one equity company. It's hard to say that that is truly investing in AI rather than investing into the equity of one business. So we kind of figured that there needs to be a new bridge for helping people invest into this emerging market. And we wanted to help do that because we figured it would do well. But there's clearly a demand for it based on how the market is going. And we figured that we could combine some interesting components with blockchain because turning something that is physical assets stuck in a data center that's not very liquid, blockchain can actually help turn that into a liquid asset. And we figured we could combine that and make that happen.
Interesting. So, kind of abstracting away the need to invest in a specific company or stock or to invest in a specific, like you said, very difficult to get access to underlying physical asset that's probably sitting on a shelf somewhere that you have to know somebody, but enabling the access to that AI exposure or the revenue generation on top of that AI related asset through compute labs, really.
Yeah, in short, yes. The vision of our business is really to just turn illiquid assets into something liquid. And so whether that's a GPU or, in the future, maybe it'd be solar panels or could be a nuclear reactor. These are things that are very useful to the market. They have a return on investment, but the regular person simply can't get into it. Turning these illiquid structured assets into a liquid structured product is what we're aiming to do. Now we start with GPUs, we start with compute products, but eventually we can move on to other types of assets as well.
Interesting. I think now looking at the huge gold rush that is AI, there definitely seems to be a strong demand for compute power, right?
Mhm.
And then I guess it's probably hard to get access. Even some of these juggernauts with billions and billions of dollars are knocking down NVIDIA's door saying, hey, I want more of the newest chip, right?
Right.
So it seems like there's a high demand there. I guess how did you find, because it sounds like you're doing like a two-sided marketplace there, right? Of like you have multiple parts of the market that you're serving with this business. How did you first get product market fit and like how did that look like the exploration to find the first few customers that are willing to say, I believe in this and I want to take a flyer on it?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And it's kind of also a internal conversation we have because we're still a young company. We get to kind of ask ourselves who is our customer? And today I'll say that our customer are investors. If you asked me 6 months ago, I would say our customers are what we would call operators or data centers. But you're right to say that our business is like a two-pronged thing. To summarize, we help investors allocate capital into procuring GPUs, into procuring compute hardware. We put it on the Compute Labs balance sheet and we put it on our ownership, though we give title to the investors who actually hold the actual ownership. In the Compute Labs, we lease that hardware to data center operators who are actually using those compute hardware, the infrastructure to serve their customers. So where we started in our product market fit is actually just first asking operators, data center operators, hey, do you guys need more compute? Do you guys need more GPUs? And the market is just generally saying, absolutely, we'll take as much as we can get. We need to serve more customers. Like we cannot get more. We just need more. And we're like, okay, cool, validated that. That was really quick. We got a bunch of demand from different operators saying that they need more GPUs. Some would have customers just waiting and with purchase of intents or letter intents, and others would just have historical saying, if we can get this many more GPUs, we know that we'll serve customers. We just talk to these people. We then tell them, hey, if we fundraise for your GPUs, we'll go ahead and lease them out to you. We'll do a rev share. They were totally cool with it. And that worked out really well. And we have a very big pipeline of GPU we need to procure. Today, I think we're sitting at almost $700 million worth of GPUs that we need to acquire. That means that there's these data centers that are coming to us, small and medium-sized businesses that just need more GPUs to serve their customers or build their business. We underwrite that. We vet them. We got to make sure that they're reputable and that they can actually use our hardware without making it faulty and all that. Now, that being said, we got that part validated. We got product market fit with operators. Now we got to go talk to investors. Hey, investors, do you guys want to own these assets? Do you like the financial return profile? Are you interested in this emerging market? The short answer is generally yes. Though investors, they're excited about this space, they're also scared, and rightfully so. And there's the dot-com era to show that things can be a boom or a bubble. So yeah, there's a lot of education now that we're implementing and providing to investors out there.
I guess when you talk about investors, there's lots of different definitions of what an investor is, like retail investor. I guess, how do you think about the split between buy-in from like institutional investors versus individual investors? What do you see as like it's getting more traction as far as there's a deeper understanding of the way this is moving and a willingness to buy in?
It's a fantastic question. Actually, I will add on that our very first campaign at Compute Labs was first doing a pre-sale to validate product market fit with retail. And it worked out pretty well. We did a fundraise for $1 million raise with retail. And we only allowed markets that legally we could accept money for these types of investments. So that means we did not accept US money or many European countries because of securities laws, and we want to follow securities laws as much as possible, as much as necessary and required, rather. And so what we did is a $1 million raise with retail, successfully closed, and we then deployed that 1 mil into GPUs, which is now delivering dividends and yield today, which is great. Though that being said, retail is actually a smaller focus to us as opposed to institutional, because institutional just has so much more liquidity, so much more capital to provide, that retail is really good for secondary markets, for bringing attention or getting people excited. Though if we need heavy capital for large purchases, we'd have to rely on institutional capital for that.
And so it's funny, I think there was a recent conference that Jensen Huang was at where he said, we're no longer building data centers, we're building AI production factories. Everything now, it's not just that data centers are used to host your data and transact over the internet. Now they are producing like net new raw material as AI knowledge as an input to things, which I thought was a super interesting take. And so you're helping to finance these AI factories. I guess, what does that, you talked about the kind of the pre-sale and the initial retail investors. I guess as you've continued on, what do those kind of projects or investments look like? Are they kind of changing over time? Are you looking for a bit of diversification? How do you think about that?
Yeah, great question. Today we've closed 3 GPU deals. One tiny cluster, which was like our own internal testing. One which went public, and that's at a $1 million capex. And today that's returning investors about, I believe, a 33% IRR or projected over 3 years. The yield, the annual yield is about like, it ranges month to month, but I think we can comfortably say it's a 40% annual yield, which is pretty ridiculously massive. I personally, I wish I could invest, but I am not an accredited investor. That's a requirement for US investors. So yeah, but the return profiles are really good. We have many more deals to offer investors, just about comfort, timing, etc.
So to that point, what has the kind of macro environment look like for you guys? Obviously, AI moves at the pace of light. I feel like every week, as opposed to every couple of months, there's something new coming out from a shock and awe perspective, but also different ways that, companies are actually figuring out how to use it, and just the demand for it is going through the roof. From a regulatory perspective, there's things like the Genius Act and the big, beautiful bill that I think have people thinking about these things and even tokens in a different way. I guess, how do you see the macro environment evolving? How do you see it impacting compute labs? Are there any opportunities or challenges for you there?
When we're looking at macro and particularly maybe legislative, there's two bills to be thinking about. To your point, the Genius Act, which is very related to stablecoins primarily. Now, Compute Labs does not plan to issue a stablecoin. Though that being said, we do payouts and yield distributions in stablecoins, and we do that in USDC. And it is necessary for us to have payouts in currencies which are generally accepted, thought of as reliable. Now, fortunately for us, USDC has like always been reliable. The Genius Act doesn't really impact us or our business because USDC was already a reputable currency. But I can see it impacting other providers who are trying to get into GPU space with stablecoins as well. The other bill that is more relevant to us right now would probably be the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was recently signed. There's a lot going on there for AI. For one, there's R&D tax credits, which basically allows like 100% depreciation expensing for investors up to a certain amount. There's qualified small business tax exclusions for investors so that the capital gain is basically tax-free up to a certain amount. Then, of course, there's just general funding and grants estimated at about like 100 billion. Now, I don't know if we can get into that. Hopefully we can. That'd be really cool. And in general, there's just like the US and enterprise companies like buying more AI. So that bill does move a lot forward. And we're hoping to use that in educating investors that like, hey, capital gains is reduced, depreciation is better now. That does go a long way when educating and selling to investors as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like the natural progression of some of these things is all leading in the right direction. It's just like, how quick do people catch on? And I'm sure with something like 33 to 40% return, there will be people that are investors in not one deal, probably multiple deals, once they get a taste. I guess when you think about the company right now and kind of as an operator, what's top of mind for you as far as progress or kind of improvements you want to make?
Yeah, it's a good question. Top of mind for us is just getting more GPUs fundraised, which means getting investors their asset, getting them something to rely on that they can get a return on investment, that they're part of the AI market. But similarly, as important is getting GPU operators, data center operators, the infrastructure they need to serve their customers. We have a ton of operators who are just waiting to get their GPUs purchased and procured, and that requires more capital. So top of mind for me is getting more deals closed overall, selling more GPU deals to investors so that we can then serve our operators who are then serving their customers.
I guess with the deals closed, are investors more skeptical about like, hey, is this 30%, 40% like a real deal? Is it more a lack of knowledge of like Web3? I guess, what are the biggest things that hold people back? Because at the surface, it's like a no-brainer.
Surface, it's a no-brainer. Absolutely. Though that's a very tall claim to say, yeah, we have yields at 30, 40%. I mean, like, if someone right off the bat told me that, I'd be like, you're bullshitting me, which is fair. I mean, I get that.
And some of the crypto bubble, I'm sure, has helped with that reputational risk of that space in the past.
Though, when we speak to investors about our products, we don't really even bring up Web3. We don't even talk about tokens unless that's an investor who is familiar with the space. Because it's a tall ask to say, hey, would you like to invest in GPUs and receive its returns from AI? That's already tough. That's already hard. Now, if I add on, hey, by the way, these GPUs they're on chain, they're tokenized, and so you actually get a representation of your GPU in a GNFT. By the way, that means GPU NFT. And also you'll get your dividends in the form of a stablecoin. That is so much more difficult to sell. So we abstract that and we just make things Web 2. And we say, hey, This is your investment into a SPV that holds GPUs, and you'll be receiving your returns in the form of a bank transfer or something like that. So we're going to abstract that for investors who are not familiar with the Web3 component, though we prefer investors who are familiar with it. To answer your question directly about what is holding back some investors, we're just too young of a company, and that is difficult. We have a really successful pilot, which really helps a lot. But for many investors who are putting a lot of capital, they're going to need to see three, four, five in order to actually be super comfortable. And I respect that. So we're looking for investors who are now, more kind of like first movers in a space and familiar with alts in general.
From my long time in the financial services industry, I definitely would see people looking for historical returns
Yeah,
to be able to model that forward in the data rooms and feel comfortable, right, about taking that swing. So I definitely get that it can be, a matter of time. It's like the slow ramp up of showing the proofs in the pudding before all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I feel comfortable and
yeah,
boom. I guess
absolutely.
how do you try and distinguish who is ready, who is kind of that alt investor that knows like a bit more, is like lower down the funnel, let's say.
Yeah, it's a good question. So generally it comes down to like in the sales process, how responsive is this customer? For example, we have some investors who get back to us like once a week. This person's not going to invest for a while. Maybe if they have other people pinging them on it or like they hear more things, they just need more impressions from the general market to get there into decision making. We have other investors who ask us things like, I don't know, every other day or every hour or something like that. It just depends on each investor and like how much work they want to put into it, how curious they are. Also, it does help when we speak to investors who are just generally familiar with the area. For example, I've spoken to investors who have invested in Nvidia and, we can have conversations about just actual GPU models. One person even said, "Oh, you guys are buying the Blackwell." I'm like, "Yes, thank you for knowing the market. That's cool." Or buying the Blackwell, that's correct. And so that makes the conversation easier. Other investors are familiar with data centers. They can move a little bit quicker as opposed to investors who are just not familiar with the space. If I'm speaking to a real estate investor, there's a lot more education I have to give them.
It's almost like your qualifying question when you first meet is, how much NVIDIA do you own?
Yeah, honestly, I've been thinking about how do I target more NVIDIA investors?
Right? Exactly. Well, so that's super interesting and that makes a lot of sense. I guess given the things that you've been doing and the momentum you've been building, what's on the horizon? What are you excited about with Compute Labs?
Yeah. So we're really excited about closing a couple more deals. We are just about to finalize the signature on a $60 million deal, which we'd helped originate. Now, that one's going to be a little bit different in deal structure, but I'm very excited for it, what it'll do for us. That's exciting. And then we're also just doing more work internally on getting like our processes better. Like we're about to get ready for auditing, which is really cool. And that's a big thing for getting financial underwriting done from any third party. So yeah, just getting more investors, getting more capital allocation is always going to be good for us.
Anything else you want people to know about Compute Labs? Anything that is exciting project or something that you guys have going that you want, it may not be announced yet, or it's something that you want people to follow up on in the coming months?
Sure, yeah. So we do have a few deals that'll probably pop up in a few months. So if y'all want to explore what our public deals will be, check us out on our website. If you're an accredited investor, you're already covered. If you're not an accredited investor, then we'll follow local regulation laws, like based on securities laws from your country. And yeah, if you want some GPU deals, come on in.
Sounds good. Nikolay, thanks for your time. Guys, we'll have all of the links to Compute Labs, the socials, a website, etc., everything. And we'll speak again later. Thanks, Nikolay.
Thanks, Nabil.